Hello, friends, family, enemies, whatever you claim to be in your relation to myself. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of this podcast, the Iron Purpose Podcast. I am Bailey Boelter, and I am the host. And today is the first episode that I did where it was in person with somebody. I got to sit down with them and converse with them, fellowship with them a little bit. And it was my Grandpa Virgil Boelter. Awesome opportunity to be able to sit down with him and listen about how he grew up, his upbringing, his career, and different adversity that he went through when he lost my grandma to cancer in 2009, kind of how he got through that and his faith, how it carried him through, and just his ability to rely on that. We get a chance to talk about his work history as a police officer in law enforcement and in corrections, and the different things that he got to do in that time period with the equipment or lack thereof that they had at that time. So, working in law enforcement, having the tools that we have nowadays, it's very interesting to hear his perspective on the lack of equipment that they had and how they had to rely on their communicating with other people. Super fun episode. It's an episode that I get to share with you, get to share with my future kids, my future grandkids, even great grandkids, something I'll be able to have saved and to be able to share generations to come about my grandpa and my family, my history. And I'm blessed to be able to have this conversation with him. So without further ado, this is the I Am Purpose Podcast, episode 15, My Grandpa, Virgil Boelter. Stay sharp, everybody. All right, I am here with my Grandpa Virgil Boelter, and he is just as excited as I am for this, I think. What you been up to lately? Anything fun and exciting?
Oh yeah, Grandma and I, we run off to bus trips as often as we can. We just went to one yesterday and watched the Suns sing in Cold Spring, Minnesota.
Interesting.
They came up from Missouri, Branson.
And they just travel all over the place, and you just happen to...
Well, no, the way they got started was that the guy that owns the motel was down on vacation with his family, and they heard him sing and liked him so well, they invited him to come up here. And actually, the leader is from Superior, Wisconsin, which is what? Next to Duluth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple hours.
So he's from this area.
Oh, fun. So I know we've talked about this before. How did you get into that, the bus tours? Is that something you have online and you just see what they got coming up, or is it all random stuff?
Grandma and I discussed this yesterday coming home from St. Cloud, and said, how did we ever get hooked up with this stuff? And I think it all started with there's a Camp 4 Springs in Wisconsin by Rice Lake, and they had a tour going somewhere, and we thought it would be fun to go on that tour because I knew the camp. I'd been at the camp before we'd gone there, and so we contacted them, paid her money, went down. Well, before we went down, Grandma kept her married name and I kept my name, so there was two different names, and they were a little bit concerned that, okay, are these guys, what's the deal with them? Are they married or not married? Or
right.
I said, don't
sweat
okay?
It. Right.
So I told them, and because it was a Christian organization, they wanted to make sure that everything was above board.
Right.
So I lied and told them we were married. But no, we were married. Told them we were married, but we just kept our own names for financial reasons and so forth. So, and then that just progressed, and one of Hazel's friends happened to be going with Gary Block Tours, and she recommended him, and so we went on the first tour with him, and I don't even know where we went, but we went on a tour with him and liked what they had and liked the people, and we've been going ever since. And that started in 2013, I think.
Wow, okay. Yeah, all that time. Well, neat. Well, now I kind of want to give you the opportunity to kind of share your story It can be as in depth as you want, or as shallow as you'd like. If
Okay.
just kind of where you came from and how you became who you are today. You are the most experienced in life person that I've had on this my podcast so far. So I'm excited to kind of get into what life looked like for you when you were growing up. And
Is that like the most messed up person that you've met, or what?
I was just gonna say oldest, but I thought I would be a little more polite with it.
Okay, all right, fine, yeah. No, I grew up in Medelia, Minnesota, which is in southern Minnesota. And I have a brother and I have a sister. They're both younger than I am. My dad worked for the railroad. My mom, she worked, I can't remember what she did when she was still married. My parents got divorced when I was probably a freshman in high school. And then she worked at the store in town and so forth. But so I grew up down there. Was in wrestling in high school. Wrestling and track were my sports things. I had two special buddies that I ran around with, and they were both farm kids. So it was an interesting life. There's more to it than that, but I won't go into that in depth. Graduated from Medelia High. One of my buddies always talked about the Marines, and if he ever went in the service, he was going to go to the Marines. So I thought, that sounds pretty good. So I checked in. My grandma went with me, and we went to Mankato, and I went to the recruit depot and talked to the Marines. And anyway,
and this was after high school or before?
This was this was after high school.
Okay. Had you had any plan of what you wanted to do with your life up until that point, or it was kind of like, all right?
No, I worked for a pig farmer. He raised Hampshire hogs, Lowell Mather, in Medelia. My junior and senior year, freshman year, and sophomore year, I worked for a family friend that had a farm over by Butternut, and it was like I stayed with them.
Okay.
So I stayed at their house the whole summer and worked for him. And then junior, senior, then I worked for Lowell Mather and graduated from high school. Well, anyway, we were talking about the Marines. So the Marines came and they interviewed me, and he said, I think you should go into guaranteed aviation. And guaranteed aviation, I don't think I'd be very good at that. Well, why would you say that? I said, I'm not in good math. And he said, well, your test score says you're okay. Okay. But he said, you have to be in for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, and this was pre-Vietnam. And I said, okay. So they sent me off to San Diego to the Marine Depot, and that was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I woke up the next morning. It was in December that I went in. And it was Christmas, before Christmas. And heard the taps in the morning, and I thought, oh boy, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
So I was there, and I got along fine. I just did what I was told, and graduated from there, and they sent me to Millington, Tennessee, which is down by Memphis, to a naval air station, and got my schooling down there, and it was 6442, and it was a ejection seats, canopies, and survival equipment or something like that. That's what it was. But we didn't have any jets, so there was no canopies.
Sure.
And we had R4Ds, an R4D, SNB, SNJ, which means nothing to you.
Are those types of aircraft? Or
Yep.
Okay.
Fixed wing aircraft.
Sure.
And we had about 5 of those. And so we had the hangar, we had radio equipment, metalsmith, mechanics, and paraloft, because we had parachutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they put me, is in the parachutes.
Interesting.
So I spent all my years there doing something I knew nothing. Packed parachutes, didn't know how to jump. so yeah, and did it right. Met your first grandma in high school. Well, we went to church together ever since we were little. We were in the same class in high school. Graduated together. I went in the service. Grandma Bobby went into nurses training in Albert Lee. And the day after, let's see, it was a day or two after she graduated, we got married.
Wow. So you've been interested in each other throughout high school, or not really? Like, when did it
we've
start?
been friends all along, but
Sure.
we got serious and we started really dating in senior high, I think it was, or junior, senior high. Yeah. So we did a lot of things. My brother-in-law has told me one time, if everything ever happens between you and Bobby, we'll keep you and she can go. Yeah. So
you fit right in then.
So anyway, her family was just my family, and it always has been.
Mm-hmm.
So,
was there any time, during your time, because you were together when you went off to Marines and when she went off to school, so you did distance? Did you write letters and stuff back to each other?
Lots of letters.
Yeah,
a letter a day.
Was there ever a time where you thought you weren't going to be able to make it because of that distance, or was it you always knew she was the one?
No, I guess it was. She's either going to get me or she's going to toss me. One of the two. She kept me. So no, it was. We wrote back and forth. We got married in the last year that I had in the service. So I was in the barracks, and this one guy knows all the guys that I worked with. They always saw me sitting on the bunk writing letters. And I had gotten engaged when I came home on furlough. And one of the guys says, "How long have you been going to this with this girl?" And I said, "Oh, ever since high school." And he says, "How long have you been engaged?" I said, "About a year." He said, "Don't you think you just better get married?" I said, that sounds like a good idea. So I went down, I went to my locker and I had a long sock full of change. And went down and made a phone call and said, I've got leave coming in whatever the date was, August, latter part of August. I said, want to get married? And it was quiet. And it was quiet. And I said, do you want to get married or don't you? She said, well, yeah. I said, okay, this is when I'm going to become. So I gave her maybe 2 months to get ready for the wedding. That was, now that I look back at it,
right.
So she borrowed a good friend's wedding dress, and I wore my dress blues, and we got married.
Wow.
I had to drive all the way back. I didn't have a car, so her dad had bought her a car to use while she was in nurses training. It was an old 51 Ford, but he didn't give it to her. We had to buy it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think I had about $300, and that's what he said. Okay. $300. So and I had to drive all the way back to North Carolina by myself, because she hadn't taken her boards yet, state boards.
Okay.
So she took her state boards and passed them, and then she came by train. And in the meanwhile, there was a hurricane coming through.
Goodness.
So she had to stop in Chicago and stay with my mom. And so she stayed there for about a week, and then she came on down and then came to Raleigh, North Carolina by train. And I went to pick her up. And back then there was colored and there was white waiting rooms, just like colored drinking fountains and white drinking fountains. Per se, only the blacks could drink or whatever.
Right.
So anyway, I went into the waiting room and nobody there. I thought, in the world. So I got to walking around, and they had a colored waiting room. So I walked in there, and here she sat with a bunch of black gals. And she's talking away, and I said, what are you doing in here? And she said, well, there wasn't anybody in the other room. I wasn't going to sit there all by myself. Man. Somebody to talk to. So, and the black ladies, they thought that was pretty neat.
That's special. Yeah.
This northerner coming down and then spending time with them in their waiting room.
Sure, especially during that time. Yeah, where it might have been a little looked down upon to have that happen, and for her to just say, "Yeah, no, let's hang out. We're all people." Yeah. Oh, I did not. That's awesome. Yeah. That's special.
Yeah. So that was her introduction to racism.
Right.
Yeah. But in the service, we were what's the word that you would use? The blacks served with the whites, and we didn't have any problems, on our base. We had a black guy that worked with us, and he was probably the squad comedian. So that was North Carolina.
Right. So what was your wedding like? Did you just?
It was really small. It was Bobby and I, and my brother and her sister, and her cousin for a flower girl, and her little brother for a ring girl.
Wow. And that was it, huh?
That was it. And I know we didn't have any counseling before we went. He wanted to have some counseling, and my mother-in-law, Grandma Ruthie, said, he's just home on furlough and he doesn't have time. He's leaving right after the wedding.
Yeah.
So we had the wedding and they had a week, and then it was get in the car and head for North Carolina.
So that was because you were still in the military at that point.
Yep.
Correct. Okay.
A year to go.
Okay.
So we spent a year, and that's when your Uncle Greg was born down in North Carolina.
Okay. So from there, how did you get back up to Minnesota? That was just
we traded the car off and had bought a station wagon, Ford station wagon. I think it was a '58 Ford station wagon, and we drove that in a snowstorm.
Goodness.
They wouldn't let you on the turnpike because there was a snowstorm going on. So we took the secondary road all the way across Minnesota or all the way across from North Carolina to Chicago. And then my brother came down from Minnesota, and we had pulled a U-Haul trailer with all our stuff in, which wasn't much, but what we had. And he loaded his car up and station wagon up and
gotcha here.
Came on home.
So you were there. So you got married in North Carolina. Had Greg in North Carolina. Was Grandma working at that time? And
yeah, she worked. She worked in the Onslow County Hospital.
Okay.
On the colored ward.
Sure. She's fitting right in, huh? She knew it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then when you were done with the military, why did you just come back to Minnesota? Because that's where you're from and that's where you wanted to be, or what was that decision like?
Well, it wasn't much of a decision.
Sure.
We didn't have any money. We didn't have any place to stay, so we went home and stayed with Grandma JT and Ruthie for, I think it was about a month. We were there, and then she got a job in Mankato.
Okay.
And when I got out, things were kind of tight for employment, and couldn't get a job. So I
across the board, or just in like law enforcement?
No, just across the board.
Yeah.
You couldn't. Everybody was full. They didn't have any jobs, and so I finally found a job with a Holiday gas station, working nights. And I think that I did that for 2 or 3 years, working nights at the Holiday station. And then, of course, Mom and Grandma was in the hospital working. So I would work nights, and she was working days, and we had, we always called her Granny Brose. It was a little lady from church that we'd go get her, and she'd stay at our house all day while I was snoozing and
babysitting.
Yep.
You had Todd at that point, or still just
Not
Greg?
yet.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, yeah, but yeah.
So then moving forward, I think now that you say this, I kind of know now where it picks up. But law enforcement, being a police officer, how did that kind of come into the picture?
Working nights, the officers would stop by at night on their shift and come in and talk and drink a pop or Coke or whatever they wanted to do and mess around and talk smart. And anyway, this one, his name was Marv Severance. He'd come around and he said, you should take the civil service exam, get on the police department. And I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not that smart. And he said, no. He said, just take it. Okay, so it came up. He made sure I knew when it was coming up for the test. Took the test, and I was number 6 on the list out of 20 guys that took it, I think. So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah.
And it was probably a year later, the chief of police died from a heart attack, and they needed to hire another officer.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a call, and they wanted to know if I was still interested in being on the department. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, everybody else I called didn't want to be on there anymore. And I said, oh, okay. So
that list? So you said
Yeah.
there was 20-some on the list. That was specifically for Mankato?
Yep.
Okay.
that
Okay.
was Mankato.
So they made their way down to 6, and that was you.
So anyway, there was 5 ahead of me. So
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, they said, well, when can you come to work? And I said, well, I think we should give them at least 2 weeks notice. So I worked for 2 weeks and then came on the department. Of course, I knew most of the guys that were on there from shopping in. So.
Mm-hmm.
So the fun thing is, I got the uniform. They gave me my gear, the gun, all the other paraphernalia that went with it. And they said, seeing as we don't know very much about your mental state, or that's not what they said, but anyway, they said, we'll give you the gun, but you don't get any ammunition. So they gave me the gun, and I worked for 2 or 3 days without any bullets.
No way. Wow.
They didn't want me off and shooting somebody.
Which makes sense, but I guess that was like their way, because nowadays you got to take a psych test and making sure you're all that and fit and whatnot. So you pretty much, you got there, they gave you the stuff, and it was like, here you go.
Yeah, you're a cop.
Good luck, but you're not getting this.
But they did put me with, I worked with another officer for about a year.
Okay.
In training.
Sure.
And they didn't know any more about the law than I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because we never studied the law. It was just, okay, you're a cop.
Right.
All right, go out, do the best you can. Get in trouble, you're on your own. So what I learned about police department is you'd come in the morning, and you'd have all the reports of what went on during that day. And so I'd read through the reports and pick out what worked and threw away what didn't work, and
interesting.
Just kept that. And
so from other officers too, you're able to see that, how they handled things, and kind of put it in your own tool belt.
What worked,
Right.
If what they tried didn't work, well, then you didn't use that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just one of those things. I always worried about doing something wrong and then getting sued.
Sure.
Because back then, your butt was hanging out to dry because there was no implied immunity.
Yeah, qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't have that back then, and I think that all changed several years later because we had some officers that made arrest in the state. Some officers made an arrest, and the guy that got arrested didn't like it, so he spent his time suing this officer all the time and screwing around with him. And so they finally put an end to that by passing that law. So that's my thinking.
Right.
But I do remember that.
Sure. So what was that like when you first started? Because you probably didn't have the the radios and the communication system that they have nowadays, and the vests. Did you even have the taser, the pepper spray? Like, what was that like?
We had the revolver, which we went from the revolver of 38 to a 9mm automatic, and then because one of the guys was cleaning it, and it went off and ricocheted up.
Oh no!
They got rid of those real quick and went to the 357 wheel or the Magnum. So what we had to use was they had what they called a claw.
The claw?
A claw.
Okay.
It was a metal thing that was shaped something like that, and then it had a handle on. So you would grab and put that between their arm and crank it, and that would give enough pain where they didn't want to fight anymore.
Pain compliance, yeah.
Yeah, unless they got it away, and then they could use it as a weapon.
Right.
Whap you. So we had that. We had what they called the sap, which was a lead-filled thing about yay long.
Like a leather-looking thing, right?
Leather with powdered with lead pellets. And you carried that. They had like these old farmer pants with for the pliers and stuff. Yeah, it was so you carried one of those. Then they had the baton that was probably about 2.5 to 3 foot long and about 2 to 3 inches, 2 to 2.5 inches in diameter
Mm-hmm.
for riot control.
Right.
And then they had the other baton that came later that was the long one with a piece that stuck out.
Off the side? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had those. And that was pretty much what we had.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know one of the guys had a pair of leather gloves with powdered lead in the back.
Oh, interesting.
Like a
little SWAT. Yeah. Interesting. I suppose, I think I've heard you say this before, but your IPC skills, or just interpersonal communication skills, using your voice, using your words, being able to talk to people, was that something that you had to figure out how to do, being that you didn't have schooling on it? Or, I mean, I'm sure you're pretty good at it.
We had no schooling.
Right.
But we did have a guy that you could have things under control, and he'd show up, and the fight would be on because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. So I've learned that the most effective tool that you had was your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It would either get you in trouble or keep you out of trouble.
Right.
And if you could talk somebody into doing something that you wanted to do, that was a whole lot better than having to fight them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I'm sure. Was that something you learned just over time?
Yes.
As an officer, I'm sure it helped a little bit working at the gas station, getting those, the people skills, the customer service kind of thing, because that's almost what you have to do is have a customer service approach with these people, especially when they're upset and stuff. And interesting.
Communications, you mentioned.
Oh,
that.
Nice. Yeah.
Communications. We didn't have any. You had a radio in the squad car. You didn't have your
portable. Yeah, the one you wear. Yeah.
Didn't have all that stuff. All we had was the radio in the squad car. So when we could take 10 minutes in the morning and have a coffee break. So we had what was called the Coffee Cup was a little restaurant in our area. The city was divided up into beats, and each beat had a little store.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd pull up to the back door, turn the PA system on your radio, and then we would go in and prop the back door open, and if it was cold or if it was hot, we'd prop the back door open and have our cup of coffee in the back door.
Just listen.
And if we got a call, then you could hear it coming. Well, then you toss stuff and in the front, off you go. After you had your training on the department, then they would put you in the squad by yourself, and it was you'd go on a call, check out. You were on your own. I mean, you didn't have backup, and so you'd go in and handle the call, and then you check back in. If you didn't check it back in, and within so many minutes, they would send another squad out to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Did that happen quite a bit? Were you sent to go check up on somebody and they were fine, or was there ever a time where it's like, oh man, this guy's not okay, we need to get more people here?
No.
Yeah.
Well, back then the people were a little bit more understanding, and if you said something, I guess the fear of the cop was there, that they didn't mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas nowadays they push the limits and see what they can get away with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's something else I was going to tell you about. Communication. That was the only communication we had. Then as we went on, we had, there was Mankato, and then across the river was North Mankato. And each department had their own dispatch.
Interesting.
And channels. And you couldn't hear what they were saying. And you didn't have any communication with the sheriff's department. Didn't have any communication with the highway patrol.
So it was just Mankato.
Just Mankato.
Wow.
Yeah. And so if you wanted to talk to, like, say, Lake Crystal was the next town down the road, they had, was like teletype.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to go up to the sheriff's department, and you'd have to get on the typewriter. And if you were a typist, it was okay. But if you were hunt and pick, it took a while.
Yeah, I'm still this.
And you'd print all this stuff out, and then you'd have this big, long tape that would come out with all the holes punched in it, like a ticker tape. Then you'd stick that in another machine, and it'd send it to Lake Crystal.
Oh, wow.
And then it would run out a ticker tape in Lake Crystal, and then they'd have to run it through a machine to see what it said.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a process.
Good process.
Because Because we still use the thing, even in the jail, it's teletype is what it's called, but it's pretty much just another form of sending a message through this other system. But that's how, like, we'll talk, like, in the jail, like, if somebody comes in on a warrant, we'll let the other county know, hey, we got somebody here on your warrant, let us know when you want to pick them up, kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Man, that's crazy. Because now, even nowadays in the squads, or even, like, at the jail, I can listen to other channels. Like, I can hear what's going on in the whole county. Brainerd, Baxter, like, all these places, Pequot, Nisswa. Man. So if there's say like North Mankato had like a pursuit or something and they came into your city, you would have no idea what was going on, and you just had that ever happened? Like, did you help out this?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I would patrol. I'd call landline to our dispatcher and say we've got a squad coming in chasing so and so. Can you put up a roadblock? Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, we did that with Lake Crystal. We had chasing the guy, and one of my buddies was chasing this guy to Lake Crystal, and he said, "Park your car in the middle of the road and get out of it."
Wow.
So that's what they were doing. They just block the road off and get out, wait for him to stop.
Or smack into it. Yeah, stop. Yeah, because nowadays they have the spike strips and stuff, and so you never,
didn't have any of that fun stuff.
Just parked and hoped it worked.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know one time somehow the detectives got word that there was a gang coming in and they were going to rob some store or whatever, and they were going to, or burgle it, or one of the two. And I know our crew was working, and they called us in, and they said, "Okay, this is what's going on." And the chief had a submachine gun, the old Tommy gun. He had that, and my captain, he had a sniper rifle, and they said, "We're not going to try to take him alive." So if they would have shown up, they'd have been dead.
Right.
Yeah. But that's the way they operated.
Yeah. There was no other. Yeah. Wow. Especially with the danger. I mean, you never know. Especially if you don't have that information. Wow. So I guess along those lines, were there? Maybe I'll back up a second. So when you think of calls that you went to, was there ever a situation where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this alive, or
no?
Never.
No.
Was that just confidence in yourself and your partners, or was it just?
It's something that just never went through my mind.
Never crossed your mind.
No. Yeah.
Interesting.
Just go in there, get the job done, and get out.
Yeah, and go home. Huh. That's cool. That's awesome. And I'm sure, like you said, like it's not the same as it is nowadays, where people are trying to shoot at you and traffic stops and, or even what did a traffic stop look like back then? Say somebody was speeding. Did you have like radar and all that stuff?
Oh,
or did you just eyeball it?
When I first started, I can't remember. We had a bubble on the roof that went around, and then you had a thing on the front that said police, and you'd flip a switch, the bubble would turn on, and so you'd pull up alongside the guy, and you'd see the police sign and know that it was cop, and then they'd pull over. I did have, and then we didn't have all the different, like the DWI stops. Nobody arrested anybody for DWI because you didn't have anything.
No state statutes on it or any
criminal
code?
They had state statute, but they didn't have the schooling for eye gaze and eyeglass. All those things, that came in later.
Sure.
And they came in about 15 years later after I was on. Before that, they developed that. Well, once they did that, it picked up. Because we had something that and then the breathalyzers came in. And I've been threatened, usually by railroad people. And then, I'm going to get you when you get off. And I said, well, you better make the first shot count because I'm on the pistol team and you're dead. And then they kind of shut up.
It's awesome. My dad would always say that too. Like if somebody's coming after us, be like, well, you better make that first one count because I'm going to get you if you don't. I like that.
But it was always railroad guys. Nobody else did that.
Yeah. Quit picking on me. Yeah, you got nothing better to do? Yeah, you hear that all the time. Man, that's crazy.
I started out working the road, and I worked the road for maybe 2 years, and then they needed a dispatcher. So then they pulled me off the road, and then I was a dispatcher for our crew. And so I worked 8 hours dispatch. And that's if they brought, back then we had our own jail. And you'd bring somebody in, you didn't, I don't know what I think they take them to the sheriff's department.
Yep, the county jail, yeah.
But the city had 6 cells. And it was like a lion's cage. You have bars up, bars over the top, and then you were up against the wall. And we had, if you arrested, well, the first thing was they used to have a statute on public drunkenness. They don't have that anymore. So get the drunks off the street. That's bad for the city. So we would get the drunks off the street, bring them in, throw them in the drunk tank, and they'd stay there overnight. Morning they'd see the judge and they'd be on their way again. We had, or if one of our guys, detectives, happened to arrest somebody and throw him in. We had one guy that I was working dispatch and he hung himself with his clothes. And one of my buddies came in and he said, "Boelter, you got one hanging." I said, "Yeah, right." And he said, "No," and he came out and he grabbed the keys and ran back in there and we cut him down. And he was a dirtbag. Someone who had problems all the time. I'm not doing mouth to mouth on this.
He made his bed, he can lie in it. Yeah.
So anyway, that was one of the things that was a dispatcher.
So the dispatch and the jail were in the same
city.
Okay, it was in the same location though. So you.
Oh yeah, it was in. Actually, you stepped out of the dispatch room, and there was an outside entrance that you could come in, where they bring the drunks in.
Sure.
And then you had your 6 cells. The other thing was that one time, and then we had to feed him in the morning. So it was somebody's job to go pick up the food from whoever contracted. They'd bring it in and feed the guys.
Interesting.
And I had this one guy, and he said, "I don't want none of that crap." And I said, "Oh, come on." You know, and I opened the door, and when he started to come out, wham, down he went. Busted his head open. "Captain!"
Whoops.
So the captain came in and said, "I'm trying to feed him." And I said, "He tried to get out." And I stiff armed him and he busted his head.
Right.
And he said, "I'll take care of it."
There we go. Yeah, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So, were you a correctional officer too at that point then, or just like what? So you're a dispatcher. Was it your responsibility to watch after these people in the jail then too? Okay, sure.
But they were only there
just short.
Usually, the only time you had anybody there was in the evening or at night.
Okay.
Daytime, you could take them right to the jail. But that was interesting. So then, what else did I do? I'm losing it. Ask me a question.
So after the dispatcher then, so you actually worked in corrections then too, correct? Or was it just in the
corrections was after I got on the police department.
Okay. So as a dispatcher you would still go on patrol every now and then, or that was okay.
I just worked dispatch and jailer.
Okay.
And, I was in there for a while. Well, then they wanted somebody to be on a records and court and records. That was where you would go up to court and you'd have all the paperwork for the judge if the guy was brought that next morning. So then I would go up and then I acted as a bailiff, and I was in there for about 10 years, I think.
Wow.
And then we got a new hierarchy or whatever. They replaced the chief of police with a public safety director.
Okay.
And that was supposed to, he was supposed to be head of the police department and the fire department. All they really did was just add another tier because he didn't do that. He was the chief for public corrections officer. And then he had 2 new guys come in, one for the fire department and one for the police department.
Okay.
So the city never did save any money doing that.
Sure.
They could have been just well off leaving it the way it was. But
interesting.
Old court.
Well, they must have stuck with that because I think even Mankato now it's not Mankato Police, it's Mankato Public Safety. Like even their squads have public safety on it. Yeah. the public safety center where it's, I think,
Yeah.
the PD and the
Right. Yeah.
fire department combined.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then I was also on the from Court and Records. Then the new guy come in and pulled me from acting as a bailiff anymore, and sheriff took that over.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was on the road for a while. And then they put me in detectives. So I worked child abuse and worked along with social director. The only problem is they never sent me to school to learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just learn by the seat of your pants.
Right.
And I had asked, can I get some schooling? Well, we don't have funds for that right now. You can't go there. So shortly after that, then they pulled me out of there.
Mm-hmm.
But
interesting. That'd be a tough thing.
You didn't know what you're doing.
Right.
You're just out there, left field.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I did something wrong or didn't do it according to the way I was supposed to do it, and they called me in and said, did you have so and so? And I said, yeah. Well, you're not supposed to do that. I said, I asked you to go to school, and you didn't send me to school.
Right.
Oh.
So, what do you expect? Yeah.
So I didn't know all that.
Just working with what I got, based off your experience and.
Yeah. So anyway, that was then. After that, then I went back on the road again until I retired. And I retired basically because I had 26 and a half years in. And a friend of mine said, when it's not fun anymore, it's time to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to that point where it was no fun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we used to, when I first came on, we would have during the midnight shift crew from whatever time we went to work till 7 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the guys that were hunters, their wives would bring in duck and wild rice, and we'd have a picnic.
Yeah, a good time. Yeah.
Or we'd grill steaks out on the back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kind of hang out, and then when a call came in, you'd go take care of it, and then
because there wasn't that much going on.
Sure. Right.
And there was probably 7 guys on our crew.
Okay.
So, counting that you'd probably have 6 guys really, because you guys had days off. So yeah.
Right. Okay. During that time, how did you manage also working the late nights or working the job as a police officer and all this other stuff with all those responsibilities that can be a heavy burden to carry, and then come home and also take care of your kids and be a dad and be a husband? Was that a difficult thing, or was it pretty natural for you? Were you able to come home and kind of take off the cape, the superhero police officer cape, and be a dad?
Yeah.
Or what did that look like?
Well, Grandma actually raised the kids. I didn't raise the kids.
Yeah.
She raised the kids.
She was the superhero.
I just would. Yeah. I go do my work, and then she was working full time at the hospital besides, and so we had Grandma Bros that came in and watched the kids. Well, of course, then when they all got older, we didn't have that problem.
Didn't need it anymore. Yeah.
No, I mean, they were old enough to take care of themselves while we were working. So.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always one of us home at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Bobby'd be working. She was working nights and get off in the morning and wait out of the snowstorm, and all that worked out. She was working. I came in and I cleaned off all the windshields on the gals that were working so they could get home. But yeah.
So then, during your career, was there, I think we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, but just the mental health side of things, maybe there had been some times where, like, you had, you literally cut someone down from hanging themselves. Like, that's a pretty traumatic thing. Or maybe you go to a car accident, or you're going to a call where people are at their lowest point and you have to be there for them. Was there anything that you did ahead of time to kind of keep your mind right with that, so that you weren't going home thinking about all the things you had to deal with the night before? Or, because they probably didn't have the same mental health resources out there too either. How did you handle all that kind of stuff?
My mental health, Scott. My mental health was my church friends, my church responsibilities there, and so I guess none of that stuff really affected me. It just slewed off. I know I had a friend, Louis Bundy, that had to pull 6 little kids out of the swimming pool in the spring because the fence had got knocked down by a tree, little kids got in there on the ice and they fell through the ice in the pool and drowned. That was hard for him. But I don't know. We never did have. I don't think he had any counseling or any grief or counseling or any of that. We just didn't have a mental health program.
Do you think there was times like when you guys got together for coffee, there just that camaraderie kind of overshadowed everything going on, knowing like this is something we signed up for, this is what we did, and we're gonna
probably
do it so nobody else doesn't have to, and that's just part of it.
I know we would the sheriff's department, the highway department, and the police. We'd have coffee at one of the restaurants on the highway along the highway, and we'd have a bull session and discuss who's doing what and this type of thing and a dumping ground, I guess is what I could call it, where you could just share with what happened or a call that you went on and this dipstick did that and
So, yeah, that's important. Yeah, having that team. Yeah.
And then I was on the pistol team the whole time. I don't think we even have pistol teams anymore.
No, I'm not. What is that?
Pistol team is where we had 7 guys that shot, and we go down and practice several times a week at the range and shoot. The city provided the ammunition, and then on conventions, our team would go up and we'd compete against other cities.
Oh, cool!
Yeah, and I've got somewhere around there. We got some trophies. I mean, you weren't much of a trophy, but there were trophies.
Yeah.
And it was good because you could keep up your
skills
at shooting. I reloaded a lot of the ammunition. I know one time I had reloading and I put in a hot shot and it was too hot and it blew the cylinder off.
Oh my goodness.
Pistol. And then from then on, they bought all their practice ammo. Then they quit reloading.
Did it themselves.
So at the conventions, I was on the police. I was on the police retirement fund. We used to have our own retirement system for the city, and then some cities had some cops that weren't quite so honest and were embezzling. So the state passed a law that all would come under the state, and they would handle your retirement funds and so forth. And that worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
Because, for us it did. We probably had the best retirement system in the state. And so I was part of that, and I know we would have meetings, and I started a rumor that we were going to have everybody retired at the same amount. That meant that everybody put the same amount in, and you all retired the same. You didn't have a sergeant getting more than the regular officer. And we had 100% participation. Got done with the meeting, and the one guy says, "Well, aren't we going to talk about this here retirement thing?" I said, "No." I said, "I talked about that. I just did that. Did you guys hear? It worked." Because sometimes you won't have nobody. Well, it's not important. I won't show up.
Right.
So
but it was important.
I showed up when that rumor got going.
Oh man,
that was about. So then after I retired with the police department, or before I retired, a friend of mine that was in corrections, he said, they're starting a new program called Sentence and Service, and you'd probably be really good at that. I said, "Oh, really?" "Yeah." He said, so-and-so, Mike Smith's in charge of that. I said, "Okay." So I went and talked to Mike Smith, and he said, "Yeah, I need somebody right now." I said, "Okay, fine. I'll work on my days off for you, and then I'll retire." So I did, and I had to go take the test afterwards.
To make sure you're qualified or what? Yeah.
So anyway, I passed the test, and I was already working for him. So then I worked for that for another 10.5 years on sentencing to service, and that was fun.
So what did that look like? Was that just
You would people back then, they probably still do it, but you could work off, if you got sentenced, you could work off your time, or you could work off your fine, or you could do all the above.
Mm-hmm.
And so they come and work with me for 8 hours a day, and they didn't actually work 8 because you had time to and time back from the job, and then they would get that knocked off, or that I think it was only $5 an hour that they could, but they like to get out because
for sure
they could smoke.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care if they smoked or not, as long as they worked.
So you worked with the jail? Was this the county at the time? County jail?
It was 2 different counties.
Okay.
It was I had Waseca County and I had LeSueur County.
Okay.
And then I had Sibley County at one time, and I had Blue Earth County at one time. But then they got other officers or crew leaders come in and work those areas.
What kind of stuff would you have them do? So were you based in the jail, or you were somewhere else and come to you?
I was based out of my home.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So my office was at home. I'd just go to the jail and pick them up, and go to this jail and pick them up, and we'd go and do our job, come back, dump them off.
What was the jobs? Were you in charge of finding those jobs for them to do, or what kind of stuff did they do?
Usually, my supervisor would go to the different counties, and then he'd say, okay, or the different townships, and say, you've got this program. They'll come in and do everything for you, and da-da-da-da. So that I would just take the guys and show up, and like we did a lot of painting, we did a lot of demolition. We did build some handicap ramps, stuff like that.
And you do a lot of that nowadays. You made ramps and stuff. Does that all come from that experience? Yeah. Sure. Have you always been kind of a handyman, or is that something you just picked up like during that time?
I grew up on the farm.
Yeah, you're right. So it's been with you for a while.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So then after you retired from that corrections stuff and being a public servant in that aspect for so long, how did your priorities, or how did your purpose change from, you clocked in and you went and helped people all day long, and all of a sudden now you're at home? Did it transfer into, your family, or what did that kind of look like? Or didn't you not really even just think about it? You just...
We lived in Mankato, and then your dad called up and said, I think it's time for you and Mom to retire and move up here. Why would I do that? We need a babysitter. So we did. So I told your grandma, and they said, she had 30 years on already at the hospital. Time for her to take it easy. So we decided, we do that. So I came up here, and your dad and I drove around and found the lot here and picked it out, bought it, went home and told Grandma Bobby, and she said, don't I get to see it? I said, yeah, there's your lot. So then we had your Grandpa Bob come up and dig the hole, and then we had a friend from church built the house for us on the condition that we hired him to build the house. Let me backtrack just a little bit. First, we were going to go get a Verndale home, but the neighbor down the street was a knucklehead, and he didn't want anybody cutting those trees down. They were going to have to cut a few trees that were really leaning. He didn't want that to happen. So we had to squelch that, and we had Jim Jarris came in and built the house. I told Jim, I said, say, I'd like to work with you on the condition you're the boss, and whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. You're the boss. Oh, that'll never work. I said, okay, fine. About 2 weeks later, he said, hey, were you really serious about that? And I said, yeah. Okay, well, we can make that work. Which worked out really good, because if he had a question about something, he'd ask me, and I'd call Grandma Bobby.
Yeah. Chain of command.
Yeah. So we had the house built, and we had it built handicapped accessible, because I knew we were both getting old. And we moved in, and 9 years later, Grandma Bobby found out she had cancer, and we lost her. But so to answer your question, from moving from there and up there, how did I handle this? Well, I was working out all the time. I would go over to, I started working with, I helped Jim, I helped Jim Jers build another house, and then we got done with that one, and then I helped Dave Wagner. He and I started building decks and steers.
Sure.
Yeah.
So just staying busy.
So we just stayed busy. Grandma Bobby didn't like that too much because he was home and I was gone, and I said, "Go somewhere." You're not just at home. Just go somewhere. Visit your friends. We had a lot of friends up here.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we moved in and had to find all new friends because
Right.
we knew a lot of the people already
Mm-hmm.
when we first moved up here.
Sure.
From coming up to Anderson's on the lake during summers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we got to meet a lot of the true friends.
Right. Just fit right in. Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit with Grandma passing away, and I remember like during that time it was obviously difficult for everybody, but from my perspective as a little kid, seeing my grandma in that state, but you kind of just being there and being that rock, like regardless, even though it was a really tough time, like how did you maneuver through that time without thinking? Because anybody in there and could say, God, why me? Why is this happening to me? And become angry and bitter towards that situation, but you never did, from my perspective.
I guess I have a different attitude. I knew Grandma was saved. I knew she was in the hands of Jesus. And if he took her, he took her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my attitude. Nothing I could do about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know Grandma said one time, she said, "How come you never pray that I'm going to get healed?" And in my mind, thinking is that she's in God's hands. And if he's going to heal her, he's going to heal her. And nothing that I can do is going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
It's his schedule. Same with my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 84 now. And some days, how long am I going to live anyway? Grandma Pettit, she lived to 101, and I don't know if I could be the same condition she was in, then that would be something else.
All right.
So that was my attitude.
Yeah.
And I knew God would take care of me, and
Mm-hmm.
he did. He gave me Hazel.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and that was the story in itself.
Yeah. Now, after Grandma passed away, was that ever something that crossed your mind, like ever finding anybody ever again, or what was that thought process?
Grandma Bobby and I had a discussion.
Okay.
What am I going to do when you're gone?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do? She said, "You'll find somebody else. But I want you to wait at least a year before you get married."
Mm.
I said, "Okay." So Grandma passed away. We had the funeral. And then we had all these widows in church. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So, and then I had a good friend, Penny Anderson, and then Trissy Simmons, and we had discussions. And I said, I'm interested in Hazel, but I've been told that she's not interested in getting married or dating or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "Don't listen to anybody else. You just go ahead and do it." And I said, "Okay." So I took Hazel out for breakfast after church, or dinner after church at one of the places down at, and I said, "I have an ulterior motive for taking you out for dinner." I said, "I'm interested in pursuing you, but I've heard that you're not interested in dating or anything." She said, "Oh, yes, I am." So I said, "Okay." The game's on.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting married. But I always tell everybody, I said, Bobby always said she didn't want me to get married until a year had gone by. She didn't say I couldn't date.
Yeah, right. So you upheld your end of the deal.
Yeah. Oh. So, it was good advice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, take that time to heal, and there was it was a healing process.
But I don't really know if I had a healing process because I don't feel I was really wounded that much because of our faith.
That's powerful. Wow.
So I don't know what I'll do I'm hoping that I'll go before Hazel.
Right. Right.
I'll go out and puff a smoke.
Right. See, that's another thing too, because you talk about being in the shape that Grandma Pettis was. She was still up and about, and being 101 years old, and that's. I mean, you got a little bit to go before you get to that point, and
tell me about it.
But you are still so spry and able to move around, and you've had a couple close calls, falling off of whatever. It's just you just seem indestructible. But do you think that's just from being so active? How you're able to continue to operate at the age you're at?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I had my heart valve put in.
Yeah.
They wheeled me in the operating room, and the nurse said, "Oh, by the way," she said, "you're going to be awake this whole time, right?" I said, "I am." Yeah. I was, "Oh, great."
Yeah, here
so
we go.
They did the procedure,
and here you are.
Here I am.
Yeah.
And I know that was when I had the stent put in, and then the next time I had the valve put in, and the male nurse comes in, he says, "Well, I can put you out." I said, the last time I was in here, they didn't put me out. They didn't give me an option.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Well," I said, it was okay. And he said, "Okay." And then after they did it, maybe I should have been out. But
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a little bit different
than
the first time around. So,
right.
But, yeah.
So, throughout your whole life, all this stuff you've gone through, and you've still been able to be a positive person, a positive light to a lot of different people. Where does that come from? Do you just wake up and think, all right, I got to be a nice guy today? Or is there like a deeper...
That's just the way God made me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing I work at. I do remember one time we were talking about a good friend of mine, Larry Anderson, and I were talking about talents. And I said, "I don't have any talents." And he says, "I know what your talent is." And I said, "Well, what is that?" He says, "Service."
Mm.
He said, "I've noticed you're always there to help serve." And I've always remembered that and thought, okay, that's a goal I can work on. Mm-hmm. And so my goal is, whether it's helping my wife, and there's a lot of things I learned growing up with your Grandma Bobby that I didn't practice, that I wished I would have practiced, that Hazel's reaping the knowledge that I've learned because of that. And I've learned that your spouse is important.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to be the most important person in your life. Mm-hmm. And I strive to attain that goal, to keep her number one. Mm-hmm. Don't care what she looks like. I don't care if she gets fat. She's got a pleasant attitude,
right?
And it's
right.
Compatible is the word I want to use. Compatible, and things have worked out really good. We like to do a lot of the same. Well, we do all of the same things. Good. I mean, we love to travel. And she said that her first husband wasn't that gung ho on traveling anywhere, and she always wanted to travel, and so we do. Mm-hmm. We're not going to give the kids any money. We're going to spend it all
and go travel, and enjoy it, live it up. That's awesome. That's something that I hope to be able to do. When I get to that age, that retirement is like get out and explore. And thankfully, with Courtney, I haven't been much of a traveler myself, but we got to go to like Italy and stuff this year, so that's been super cool. But back to service real quick. And you said you have that service is your, it's kind of your thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to putting your wife first in that context, was there ever a time where you felt like your service was compromising that relationship with your wife, or do you think it was just separate?
I think your service doesn't compromise. It enhances. It enhances your relationship because she's seeing what you're doing. You're doing it for her, not for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cool. Wow. Yeah, that's we've been talking for an hour. Can you believe it?
Real? No. Who's going to want to watch this?
Me, my kids, my grandkids, and I think a lot of people. So I just got a couple random questions just to finish up. You talked about traveling a little bit. What's been your favorite trip that you've ever been on, regardless of who it was with? What was the coolest experience?
People have asked me that. What each place is unique in its own place and time and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't say, well, this has been my favorite, because you go there and you get all the experience, you see things, you do things, you meet people, and okay, that might be your best spot until the next time
Right.
you go somewhere else and you start all over again. We've been to Honduras, worked as a mission deal and helped with an orphanage there.
Mm.
That was really unique
Yeah.
because it wasn't all modern, and their hot water is not hot. So
Quite the experience.
You take a cold shower every night, you know? And so we would meet in the middle of the compound, head to head, to do our prayers.
Hmm.
And then next day you have all these little kids come in, and she would be knitting, and they discovered that I had hearing aids. And if they'd come up and go like this here, they'd whistle. So that was really.
So each trip is
China was. We met your Aunt Ashley in China.
Cousin Ashley.
Or cousin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she is your cousin. Yeah. We met her there, and were able to spend some time with her, and it was fun seeing everything that we saw there.
Mm-hmm.
Been to Norway on the fjords and experienced what that was like, you know, with a big ship and going up these narrow channels.
Mm-hmm.
England, going all the way around the British Isles, ending up in Normandy.
Wow,
that was.
I'm sure that was pretty surreal. Yeah. Did you get to go on the beach where they stormed?
Yeah, we were up looking down, and going on the beach is not much. But if you look down at the fortifications and what those Rangers had to overcome to get up to the top, yeah, and they lost the majority of their command doing that. Then going to Israel with Grandma Bobby and Hazel. They were both on that trip. And I've got a picture. So we're running through some pictures. I got a picture of both of them coming out of the tomb at the same time.
Way. Oh, that's awesome. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So where else did we go? Been to Germany. You know, so I've been around a little bit.
Yeah, so it sounds like each one was the best one at that time.
That's right.
So it's I thought of so Tom Brady, he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He won 7 rings, and everybody, they ask him, what's your favorite one? What was your favorite experience in one? And his response was, the next one.
Yeah.
The next one that I'm going to take, that's going to be my best one. So it kind of sounds like each trip is its own experience. And you know, maybe when people ask you, the next one, that's going to be my favorite one.
The bus trips, daily bus trips, week, you know, some that go for a week. They've all been unique. I think the best part about that is some of them can become family. I know the guy that owns that does the bus trips, Gary Block. He's Catholic background, and I called him up one day and I said, you know, I'd like to do something, offer my services. I said, can we do a Bible study while you guys are in church somewhere else? I said, I'll do something for the Protestants. He said, I'm glad you asked, because he said, I felt kind of guilty. Catholics all go off to Mass, and he said, you got the Baptists and Lutherans, the Presbyterians, and all these other ones. You can't go to each one of those churches. But if you'd be willing to do that, yeah, that would be nice.
Wow.
So that's been my ministry, and we've probably gone and met 3 times, because the rest of the times we come home before Sunday.
Sure, right.
So, but anyway, it was nice because I got to know some of the. We've got one gal that has started reading her Bible because of what. I mean, I didn't do it.
Right place, right time.
Yeah. And
being willing to do that.
You know, what would I recommend? And I told her, and I said, if I would not get the King James, I said I would get the New International Version because it's easier for you to read.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I grew up with King James. To me, that's my Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it would be better off if you would. And so she's reading through the Bible. She went through last year, and now she's starting again this week. So, yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so they're family.
Yeah.
And I know there's one lady said, you're the pastor, right? And I said, no. I said, no. I said, I'm not.
I've done a lot of things in my life, but not one of those.
Yeah. So it's been a great. God has given me a good life.
Yeah.
I've got my grandkids, got my great grandkids, got more great grandkids coming.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Yeah.
Got another one.
Yeah. So and
Yeah.
we get to run off and see the kids in 3 different states. So,
Right.
Yeah. So that's nice too.
I'm sure that's been a cool experience too with Hazel getting more family and more people to be a part of their lives.
So,
yeah. 2 more questions, 2
right.
just random silly ones. So people know you as a whistler. You're whistling, it seems like all the time. Is there like a go-to whistling song that you like to just, or is did you just make it up on the fly?
Some of it I make it up on the fly. Some of it just pops into my head and I just start doing it. And I've been doing it for years.
I believe
when I worked in the court system, I would whistle all the way from the police station up to the courthouse. And when I came back, I'd walk all the way back. So. Whistling.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the last question, you've been a handyman your whole life. What has been the most useful tool for you?
My brain.
Good answer. Yeah.
I don't have. I just use all the tools.
All the tools you got.
Some are really dangerous and we probably shouldn't be using them, but.
Oh man. Well, that's awesome. That's all I got for you. That's and we're right around that time, about 1 hour and 10 minutes. So
okay.
Appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I don't get up here enough to hang out with you. So I thought let's record a conversation and we'll get it out there for people to listen. But I love you. You've been a huge inspiration in my life. I wouldn't be where I am without the guidance that you've had over my life. And thank you isn't even enough. So
right.
I love you. It doesn't matter what they're thinking or what they're saying.
Don't.
All right.
Me over.
Right. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you later.